We are sketching in Egypt today. So here's my sketchbook. I'm gonna start with a pencil. You are free to draw with any medium you favor. Pencil, ink, color pencil. We may even include some color, watercolor if you want at the end of it. I'm gonna start by, as always, a warm-up exercise. So we have a pyramid on screen, and actually, if I were to just take this away for a second, could you visualize and draw a pyramid without looking at one? Well, we generally have an idea that we're dealing with a triangle, but what kind of triangle is it? As we know, there's triangles that have equal sides. Two sides are longer. Some sides are rectangular. So here I'm looking straight on at a pyramid, or am I? Could I be standing here and consider this a pyramid? Well, yeah, well, it's a triangle. And if I'm eye level with it and looking, I probably won't see the sides. Same thing happens with, just to show you very quickly, what happens with volumes. So would you believe me if I told you that this was a cylinder? So what we're going to play with is a little bit of the perspective. Now, as soon as I tilt the level from where I'm looking at it, and the more and higher I am, the more I'll see the perspective and the circle. Same thing is going to happen with the pyramid. As I turn my point of view towards either one of these sides, what I'm going to begin to see is angles. And so I want you to take this vertex or this line, and I did this just for extra help. If you look on the screen, I'm going to show you. We have what seems to be a 45-degree. Now, I don't know if this is helpful. For some of us, it may be. For some of us, it makes it worse. Oh no, math. Well, not really. Well, all I want you to focus on is, we all know what a 90-degree angle is. So if I take the ground and I'm looking at a pyramid, if I see a 90-degree angle, it would look like this. There's my 90 degrees. 45 degree is half of that. So I could use this imaginary line to kind of give myself that split and come up with a 45-degree angle. Now, that doesn't mean that all pyramids are 45 degrees. As you rotate your point of view, so you know that every corner should be 45 degrees, right? But because the one that's closest to us right here has a different angle, would you believe it? Yes. I measured it at 65. So how do I come up with a 65-degree angle? Well, I know it's not 90, which would be there. And I know it's not 45, which would be here. So if this is 45, what is half of that? It would be something right in the middle, right about here. Now, in perfecting this, you may be ready to throw your pencil or put it down and say, nope, I give up. But it's not like you have to. It's just shortcuts that we use for all types of drawing. And this one, again, is 45. And would you look at that? Now, one extra thing here is we're going to deal with perspective. Now, because I'm standing here in this point of view, I know that this corner, as it touches the ground, is closer to me than this one. So obviously, I know there's a little bit of angle on the ground. Same thing with this one. This one is going to go away. And that is how I'm going to deal with my perspective, whether it's this way or downwards, in order for me to draw my pyramid. So that's my take on a simple volume, a pyramid. And now we can go back. And what I want to focus on is the next thing. So I am going to go ahead and draw my pyramid a little bit bigger. I am going to emphasize and put, let's see, just a little more care into the quality of line. So now that I know my angles that I'm looking for, I want you to just freely sketch. I don't want you to get overthinking what the angle is supposed to be, what that line is supposed to measure at in terms of degrees. But what I do want you to is have a sense of proportion, composition. So I'm taking this bottom 2/3 of my page, and what I want to do is kind of have a sense of where my apex is. I want to have a sense of that 90-degree visualized and a 45-degree line. Should be right about there. And I know that 45 the opposite way should be, if I have 90 degrees here, it would be half of that. So once I have this structural or foundational basic shape, I should be able to now find, this is interesting because I could make this 90 degrees as we discussed earlier, and I could have that point of view. Now that may shift the angle of these as well, but I am not looking for a 90-degree line. I'm looking for a, we said 65-degree, which should be right about here. Now, do I have to do all these degree measurements to draw a pyramid? No, you don't. You could just check your angles. And I've shown you this before, where you take your pencil, you're going to close one eye, place it over your reference, and then just bring it over to your paper and check it. And that, as long as you can confirm it, be close to it, you should be fine. Now I'm going to now measure the angle of the bottom. And this one seems almost horizontal, but it isn't. This is actually a little bit higher. And it seems like it's going away. But it could give the impression of a horizontal line. Now, this is not going to be about drawing pyramids this way. We do want to engage in quality line mark making. So, first thing that I want to show you is, yes, I'm dealing with light. So I have lots of shadow that I could deal with on this side here. But if we take a closer look, we're going to see lots of small volumes. And this is where I want you to really kind of examine and get playful. Because every little line that we're going to break as a smaller shape here is going to have just a bit of the same. A bit of three-dimensionality and a bit of light and shadow. So let me show you a little bit closer. So what kind of line? We've discussed before. One thing I really want to pay attention to is I have a line at the base of my pyramid that has this sort of direction here. So every line is going to follow as a parallel line to it. So I want to give myself a little bit of a grid. Now I focus on the type of edge. So this is not a pyramid that is nice and smooth. It has a lot of, think about it, you could see the volume and the kind of staring. It's like becoming a stair, steps of a staircase, just having little rupture going sideways. And as I follow these lines, what I want you to do is I want you to come up with, whether it's, we've seen it before, cross hatching, parallel lines, you could do scumbling, and this one should be a little more geometric. It's not, or could it be some of that organic scumbling that we saw before, where it gets really just jittery and expressive? Now, one thing to consider here is, do I like the quality of the overall look? We could take, for example, I'm going to take this side, and I could just, as I deal with the edge, deal with my perspective, the direction of the lines as I bring them in parallel. And I could just do a complete cross hatching. How do I do that? I bring parallel lines and then cross hatch them at a different angle. I could do parallel hatching. And this obviously seems a little bit easier on this side because we're dealing with light and shadow. Now you can begin to see how we begin to give it characteristic qualities, not just of light and shadow, but a little bit of that. And see, my lines were a little bit off. We follow this, whatever line, whatever angle we placed at the base, that's going to be the direction of the lines on that side, just to guide you. So this one, believe it or not, and this is one of the biggest mistakes, should follow the same exact angle all the way up. And here's where I missed it. All the way up. Sometimes we begin to go into the opposite direction and you lose that sense of perspective. So just to show you a little bit wider, I could just take this line and begin to make some of them darker. But the idea today is to really explore what kind of quality creative lines can you see in this image for you coming up with them. So notice that I did a little bit of this parallel perspective, and I'm going to bring just lots of parallel hatches, and I'm going to just begin to add them up. Now, for those of you who have been in previous classes, you may have heard this before. The biggest tip that I can give you, other than have fun, is to look at your reference. I want you looking at your reference 9 times more than you're looking at your paper, which almost makes it blind drawing, they call it, which is I don't look at my paper. I can literally place my pencil and begin to just put down pencil marks as I see the direction, the thickness, the value, meaning the darkness of some of these lines. And I'm just showing you here how this could be one of the ways that I could begin to describe all the smaller little volumes, and they absolutely look like cubes that could be completely different on this side than they would be on this side. So do I have to count every single little line and every single little step exactly like I see it in my reference? No. The idea here is to capture what you see as standing out, as essential. Now, what I see most are those breaks of light and shadow, where I see shapes that are darker. Almost all of them are cubic, meaning they're flat, laid down, rectangular volumes. And some of them actually do look like cubes. And you can begin to form the illusion of that volume. So remember, this is just a sketch and just an idea where you can actually test out the pace, the quality of line that you're going to bring in. And in this case, I started with pencil, but why not? I could bring a pen, and any type of pen, ink pen, nib pen, and this is a beautiful instrument to work this kind of line. Even ballpoint pen, any type of pen, and I'm going to go ahead and use this one, where I could just, of course, I went a little too far with the lines in this one, but I am going to work just a quick gesture of ink lines where I'm going to get a better sense. And that is what we're going to be doing for our exercise. Remember, this was just a warm-up. So I want to show you the kind of line that I'm working on this side, where we have that, the shadow side, really. But my ink marks, as you're going to see here, I'm following the pattern of the lines that I laid down, that perspective, and I could make them spaced, parallel, sort of dashes. I could make them zigzags. I could be a little more creative. And again, this is better defined as you're looking at your reference and picking up the things that you see. Once you see a shape or a volume, a value, meaning darker, lighter shape, translating it into some of these ink lines is going to give you that beautiful, one of a kind, very unique sketching that we want to achieve today. Now, in this specific drawing, there is a lot of dark on this side and there's a lot of light. So I don't want to bring this to the level of darkness, and that way I'm going to better create that illusion. So sometimes we just put little dashes instead of the full line. So this one is more broken, and as I mentioned, there's just those pops of shadow that I'm trying to pick up as I follow the direction of my parallel lines that dictate my perspective. And then the final thing is pace. I could work at this very slow, very accurate, very precise, very careful pace, or at a super loose, gestural. This pen does not throw lines in that way. Switching over to this one may do it. It's a little too thin. Gotta go with the 0.5. Here we are. And managing the pace that is comfortable. It has to be comfortable for you. Let's do one last one here with this fountain pen, where I could bring in some of these lower lines and begin to incorporate a little bit of, obviously we don't have much background. That's where I was inviting maybe to bring in some color, some different type of medium. It could be just graphite, it could be just pencil, where you just create a little bit of blending into the background. But some of these stones and things that I'm adding down here, with this type of pen, because it's not permanent ink, I could bring a little bit of water and just create somewhat of a wash. So having the right type of ink as well could create something that is really beautiful. And this almost starts, it goes beyond the sketch, starts acquiring painterly qualities, where now the lines and the brush are competing, and it's your job to maintain a good balance. But isn't that beautiful? So you begin to see where this can go. And it will take just a little bit of exploring how you're feeling it, how you're seeing it, and maybe switching tools from pencil to color pencil to ink, and see what the quality of line, what kind of quality of lines and variety of lines or consistency of lines you can deliver. It is about you being creative. Now, if I haven't mentioned these before, there's only 3 rules. Number 1, have fun. Find a way to make this fun. It's just a quick exercise. It is mostly an exercise in observation. It could be a little bit of an exercise in focus. It's definitely an exercise in creativity. Number 2 is no fear. There should be nothing to fear here. You can experiment, make mistakes, try different things, see how it goes, and just enjoy the process. And number 3, be kind. Judge it nicely. Don't judge your work too hard. It's just an exercise. And it's something that we all do. We have that voice that tells, oh gosh, oh no, this is not looking like what I wanted to, or things like that. Be nice. Find yourself in that place where you can be having fun, experimenting, learning new things, and taking this to a place you didn't know you could go before. So there's a lot more for that sketch, but that's not where I want us to focus. Now we're going to take the other side. And I gave you 2 choices. I gave you this one, which is a little more landscape. And I gave you this one, which is a little more portrait with a couple of little camels there in the front. So it is going to be your choice to select this one or this one. And here you have, I see 6 pyramids, 3 big ones, 3 little ones in the front. I think same here, but different angle. And just to select the composition that you want and begin to develop your picture. So I am going to go with this one. The one you see on screen, that's the one I had prepared. And first thing, I'm going to start with a horizon. I'm going to pretty much set this just above middle. I'm going to start with very, very light lines. Very light, actually. I'm going to find my middle. And I see the center of that tall pyramid right there. And just giving myself a marker. I know we're not 90 degrees. And this doesn't mean it's necessarily 65. But I want to measure that angle. Bring it over. And just kind of get a good sense of it. So what did I do? I took the pencil to my reference. I measured it. Lay it right on top. And then bring that angle right over to my paper. And then just match that angle. I should double check these just to make sure you saw and marked. There it is. Because sometimes we move it from the reference. By the time we get to the paper, we shift it just a little bit. And that little bit sometimes could be a big deal. And there's the other one. So I'm starting with the tallest pyramid, and I'm going just a little bit beyond the lines, just trying to capture that main shape, the main angle. And I notice that this one lines up almost perfect and continues into that smaller pyramid right in front of it. So they have the same position. And this one should be parallel to this one. So what I do here is, in order for me to get an accurate read, this one goes all the way to what is my horizon. These 2 should also be parallel. So where I find my apex for this smaller one, I'm going to just measure that. You could actually get a good measurement from the top of this pyramid to the base, where you can actually see that and see if it's halfway, a quarter above it. So it should be right about here. And parallel that angle, which means it's matching this one here. You can see how it goes beyond. So now I have this little shape, negative space. And this one should be parallel to this one as well. So now that I have that, and I can easily just copy the angle, all I do is worry about where that base is going to end up. I have a smaller pyramid right in front of it. I could begin to erase some of these lines as I don't need them anymore. Because remember, most of my work is going to be with ink. So I have these. This one continues. And I am going to want to just get a very precise, this one here, the angle. Because this is going to dictate, remember, how this side is developed all the way to the top. And on this side, we could actually see the angle. And we could add those lines. All of them parallel. All the way to the top. This is going to shift a little because now I'm going by checking my angle. This kind of line. And actually, they seem to be also parallel. Now, what do I mean by parallel? This imaginary, I don't see the base of the bigger pyramid in the back, but it resembles, it is parallel to the line and the angle of this one in the front. So every line here also parallel. Very careful with these angles. As soon as we shift it, the look of your entire pyramid is going to shift. So start with parallel lines and just bring them all the way up without looking at anything else but how parallel those lines are to each other. Let's go to the one in the back. This should also resemble and match the perspective, the angle. So I'm seeing it right about here. And I have a little clue. This one, if I were to draw a line relationship-wise, this one is a little taller. And I have this little triangle here between my tallest pyramid and the smaller one, which should also be parallel. And same with this one here. So this angle should match that one. So it's just a little bit of strategizing. Just a little bit of setting yourself up for success. That's what I call it. Very hard to read that bottom angle there. But the detail in this one is going to be so far back that the lines are just going to be kind of hinted. I could have a little bit of my horizon begin to pop up. Some of these shadows. Nice. How I'm going to deal with that. Some of the space. I want to really, really emphasize that space between our pyramids so it doesn't just all look like one big volume. And how do I do that? That's going to be done with light. These shadows right here. The quality of these lines that get a little bit sharper. And these will get a little bit blurrier. Using pencil and ink to create a little bit of that extra just contrast of line. And I'm going to go ahead and avoid these. I'm just going to go all the way to the bottom and just add a few little smaller little walls or volumes here hinted at it. And I do want these camels somewhere over here down in this dune. And I'll get to them. Just dabbing a couple of little dots get a sense of the size. And there we have it. So this is my setup. And I'm going to start with a fine pen. Now, I usually recommend micron pens. And you have different gauges from 0.8, 0.5, 0.3, 0.2, 0.1, and then your smallest, which is 0.05. That's a good set of pens there. You could, believe it or not, get different gauges with one pen. It's a little bit harder. Now, this is a fountain pen, but you could get finer lines just by working with the pressure and adding more pressure to get a thicker line, as you can see here. It is a little bit more practice and how to control it. And I do like this fountain pen, maybe to set me up for my outer edges. So what I'm doing here is I'm looking at my reference. If I can, I'm going to zoom in. Take a really close look at these edges. And I'm going to start just outlining. And as we discussed earlier, really beginning to play with mark making. Now, most of these are going to be small little dashes. And a lot of it is going to be blind drawing, meaning I'm looking at my reference. 90% of the time, 10% of the time, I just check back to see if I'm staying within that direction or the line that I'm intending. And as you can see, I'm adding nice little jagged, broken little lines here. As I moved up, and I'm looking really a close-up of my reference, keeping my eye on it, I want to begin to read just the shift, the break, dabbing little dots, I have the pencil marks right underneath, and I want to kind of stay within that perspective, adding little areas of darker shapes, of dark spots. Obviously, they're shadows. But notice how I'm putting in the definition. You could call this just scribble. It's more of a scumble. But in a way, it feels like I'm dashing, adding little dashes that then I'm going to fill up a little bit with wherever I see a little bit of extra dark. I want to leave the light wherever I see it. So it's straight dashing, dotting, and a bit of hatching and scumble. And the scumble feels almost like I'm writing. Just a combination of very loose letters. Mostly letter U's or N's or W's. Now, the one thing I do want to pay attention to is this side is going to be darker. It catches a lot more shadow than this side. So the quality of the line here is going to be, I could work a little more horizontal here and more vertical here. And notice, just to emphasize that, yep, it's broken into little steps. I could just do it vertically. Make sure I get a little more contrast from this side to the other. And I'm going to actually stick to the edge like I did previously. And now this one is going to be very sharp in contrast to its background, which is this pyramid we see back there, which is going to be very light, maybe even that 0.5. So notice the very less than hair thin lines that I'm trying to draw in there. See if you could see them. They're mixing up with the pencil. And And there'll be tiny little dots. And that basically creates the illusion of distance. There's lots of space between this pyramid here, sharp, darker, bigger, thicker in terms of lines, and these back there, which are very thin. Just, we see blurry dots of lines that are coming together. So we get the feel of it. But the quality of line, notice how much thinner, finer, lighter, and how it makes it work. So the contrast once again between this edge and that back pyramid, it's going to play a big part. And then again, the lines, as I bring them more vertical here. And how many of them? That's going to be the trick. Do I do every single little step? It's going to take a little bit of one big tip that I'm going to give you here. We sometimes get a little too close and we stay there for too long and we lose track. So backing away, so taking your drawing and looking at it from 3 feet, 6 feet. So standing up, backing up, I begin to see that this is way lighter than I wanted it. Needs to be darker. Have more contrast. So it stands out from this side. So already I could just pick on that and add a few more lines. Now I am wondering if I'm going to add a little bit of wash, like some of these water-soluble ink fountain pen that could create a wash for those shadows. But I want to keep it mostly, I want to keep as much as I can line. So the other way is you take your biggest pen, in this case 05. Well, I do have a 08, and that may be way too thick for the kind of line that I want to do here. And we start with the lines. Once again, blind drawing, meaning try to look at your reference and trust your hand. Begin to trust your hand. That's the key. And you're just following what you see. And when you make sense of that, oh, of course, how am I going to draw it if I'm not looking at it? It means I'm just making it up. So when you actually see a line and you see the shape of that line and you can render it, translate it, you are going to have such an easy time drawing anything. Because that is the secret. You are reinterpreting, representation of the thing you're seeing. And the better you see it, the better you understand it, the better you're going to be able to draw it. But you need to see it. And there is a problem. There is a glitch. It happens in our brain, where because I know what a rock looks like, I just begin to draw the symbol of a rock, but not this rock that's right here in front of me, and the shape of it and the shadow of it. So notice that these lines are getting a little bit more compact, a little more saturated. Now, quick question. Is it okay for me to turn my sketchbook when I'm doing this angle of line and just do the pattern because it's easier for me to draw these? Of course, as long as you don't smudge like I just did. And that is another tip. Try to work from top left to bottom right if you're right-handed. That way you don't lean your hand on your drawing and smudge. So every trick you can come up with that makes it easier. And then I'm going to say it. Pace, pace, pace. How you manage pace and how you manage the way you see light and shadow How do you define your reading of light and shadow in these forms? That's what's going to do it. And what is the best way? What is the best quality of line? I'm beginning to do a more hatching, more dashing of the line. Let it break. For those who are really, really adventurous, I really want to experiment and draw with, see how far I could go. How creative can I get? What about pushing my lines to the limits? I would challenge you to take the pen. If you're right-handed, put it on your left hand. Especially when you have lines like this that could be kind of squiggly. And oh no, I lose total control. But look at the quality of the line that you begin to create. So going left-handed and testing what kind of marks can I make? It's a little harder to do what I'm used to doing when I think I'm drawing, because now I lose a little more control. So I have to be, in a way, a little more aware of what's going on. Is that a good thing? So this is one great exercise. Shifting over to your opposite hand. And if you shift over to your opposite hand and just look at your reference, not at your paper, now you are in what I call perfect practice. It's not practice makes perfect. It's perfect practice makes perfect. Because you could practice the wrong thing forever and you're not getting better. But if you make perfect practice, you get better faster and definitely going to enjoy it more. I learned that from sports. You could go practice hours and hours and hours. You could be practicing the wrong way. One little tip, one little thing that opens up a whole new way of understanding emotion, a way of balancing or doing something different, and now you feel like you're starting from scratch, and see how where that can go. So same thing with drawing, just giving yourself challenges, sticking with it, practicing it. If it's perfect practice, then practice makes perfect. So even trying to draw some loose lines here in these dunes, going with the left-handed, and I see that some of you are testing this tip. Good for you. It is amazing. There are great exercises to practice this. I actually will introduce a class for drawing techniques that will, you cannot be impressed, wowed by what you do at the end of those sessions. Because if there is something that is amazing, is the way our brains work. So here we go. It does slow you down a little bit, which also is a great thing. But the quality of line shifts completely. There is this understanding of it, brain theory, brain science, which is very recent. If you're familiar with yin yang, dark, light, positive, negative, and there is nothing positive, negative about it. It's just cold, hot, all the yin yangs you can think of. Polarity, basically. There is one that deals with masculinity and femininity. And I understand lines could be very rigid and straight and angular, and some that are, in this case, what I do with my left hand. And they are just Instead of logical and analytical, they're intuitive and playful. And it is a different part of your brain that is actually controlling this. When I do left-handed lines, I'm using my right brain. When I use my right hand, I'm using my left brain. So the less verbal you are as well, the more you can understand relationships in space, the easier it's going to be to draw. And it is coming together really nice. So let's go ahead and move to a smaller. And this is the strategy of moving from one pen to the smaller one. So from 0.5 to 0.3, and being able to tell in the quality of line now with the gauge of that line. And I'm just going to go with left hand all the way. Now, the challenge is complete. And it doesn't matter if you're not using your left-handed, and if you're left-handed, your right hand. If you are avoiding looking at your reference. If you're doing left-handed, but you're just looking at your paper, you're missing a big part of the challenge. The trick is really trusting what you're seeing and being able to just transcribe it, trust it. And you notice that the left hand has a little more, it's a little more rebellious. It's like a, I don't want to say like a teenager. Teenagers are cool. It's just, hey, go this way. No, I go that way. Oh, actually, it's pretty good. I like that way. Something like that. It's the way we want to force our lines, the way we want them to look, and then being surprised by some of these more beautiful lines that we were, kind of fighting or avoiding. So here I'm going with the lighter touch, also with the lesser gauge of pen, the 0.3. I'm making my lines intentionally as if they were at a distance, blurrier, way blurrier than this one, as you see in the reference. So notice that the sharpness and the darkness of the shadows has this atmospheric perspective, which is there's a lot more air between us and the object, meaning it will look a little blurrier. The closer the object is to us, the darker, sharper, and obviously bigger it's going to look. So there it is, just one quick side. I'm going to go ahead and use this same pen because this side right here is darker. And now notice that there's barely any jagged edge on the side of that pyramid. It almost begins to look kind of like a straight line. I do interpret it, I read it as just a little bit of, there's tiny little breaks. And if there's a big, massive break in that line, that means there's a big, huge block. At this distance, it almost becomes not quite a straight line, but very, very different from this one or this one. So there it is. And you could actually look closer and, oh yeah, look, there's all that, those jagged edges beginning to work a little more. Cross-hatching, scumbling to begin to add value. One additional tip. Squinting. When you squint really, really hard, if you haven't yet, do it now. Squint really, really hard. Almost through your eyelashes. And what you're going to see is the shapes of light and shadow. So I want you to squint really hard, and can you tell the difference between this shadow shape and this shadow shape? A little bit. They're very close. They're both in the shadow side. Obviously, we have those shadows right here in the smaller pyramids in the front. And then we have that last shadow back there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And this almost should be the strategy you should follow. It almost always is a question of value. Can you read values, lights and shadow? Because you're always dealing with light. What's light? What's shadow? And already you see how just adding that touch creates the illusion of volume. Now we know where the sun is coming from. Now we could even guess what time of day it is. And from there, I'm going to finish up this line. Again, it gets a little smoother, especially up here at the top, where I also see some cracks and some of that direction. Using a lot of blind drawing, so I could see better. I could see what's really there. I see a little more carving, couple of little bit straighter edges, 90 degrees almost, they look like, and a few broken lines right here. And I don't want to speed up. Maybe I need to slow down here and go to a smaller gauge pen. I don't want these to be too close. So I'm just going to do the edge. I'm doing this blind drawing, and I'm almost just following intuitively where that line is and barely even seeing any detail. I see some just kind of looks more like rock formation, erosion, obviously, but you lose that sense of the blockiness of the earlier pyramid and this one here in the front. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that. So see that kind of texture that we added there? And I mentioned I was going to go to a lighter pen in order to add those smaller, blurrier, thinner lines. But before I do that, I want to go to this one. So this front is going to have a lot to say. And how I develop this, you may want to, it's going to require a little more accuracy. So with your exercise of working with the left hand, you're going to really have to pace yourself and check yourself in terms of the direction of the line every time you're ready to draw one. And the other thing we have with this kind of exercise is you don't have the versatility of what the right hand can do, which is filling in areas. I'm just going to go ahead and add some straight lines that are thinner. So it's almost like a parallel hatch, just to guide. And I'm going back and forth, trying to match some of those edges and line them up. And this is the type of challenge that sometimes you want to. So can you begin to see how this is going to look very different than this? Therefore, you get that illusion of closeness. So this type of exercise, can I match that type of line with left hand? And it also adds a little bit of that character. So I'm really using very, very light pressure. Ultra light pressure. But the lines are not as straight, which also gives it a little bit of that really unique quality. And I'm really trying to do my best to keep them all parallel so they follow that direction. So I'm not comfortable doing the back and forth, just like I did with my right hand. But here, there we have it. Now, how much more do I need to add? There's a couple of markings that are shadows that go up and down some of this area here. I want to make sure I take my time. It may be a little bit too thick, this pen, to do that type of shadow in there. So I may hold off and do it with a smaller, because sometimes that little bit of impatience, not having the patience to switch to the right pen. See how that got a little bit too big, too dark? It almost became this. So I knew better. I'm going to go down to a 0-1. And now just add that kind of marking here, here. And you notice the difference. You could also just begin to dab, scumble. And this very light, this is going to be just the ultra lightest angle of line, where you could barely see it. I'm doing it a little faster on purpose because it's just a lighter pen, little tiny pressure, very limited pressure, and it's less than hair thin. I don't read any type of, so I'm almost stippling here, just adding dots just to saturate some of that shadow area, some of those breaks. And some of these lines need to come over here, and they're going to be just a little bit thicker. So a little bit slower makes them a little bit denser, a little bit darker. And there we have it. I think I need a little more. I'm going to use a little bit of cross-hatching on this side. Very carefully. I don't want it to go overboard too quick. So I feel like it needs a little more shadow. And I'm going to begin to drop that shadow following kind of the direction of the wall here. And I could come in and add more marks, smaller little shadows. But very delicately, I could add just that small little hint, deepening the value just a little bit to make it more in that shadow area. I needed more definition, contrast from this side to this side. And I think I got it. And as long as this stays darker than that, this needs to be just a little bit closer. Be very delicate with it without pushing it too fast or too far. So I can control. And if I look at it at a distance, I begin to see it, and it works. So the final touch. I'm going to go to, I guess 0-1 will do it. And I'm going to challenge you to put your pen down. Have a sense of, you know what? I'm going to do it left-handed. Why not? Let's finish the challenge complete. Left-handed, keeping my eyes on my reference, and I'm just going to scumble these little camels. Just scumbling the shape. Obviously the legs are going to be very thin. But most of my attention, again, you have to trust. You have to trust what you're seeing. So there's one. Kind of looks like a deer, a little bit. I'm going to do the next one. And I'm going to scumble it blind. So I put my pen down where it's supposed to go. I connect my eye with where I'm supposed to be. I'm looking at negative space. I take one quick peek to see if I'm in proportion. And I could literally follow this into the next camel. And into the next one as they connect. And you're seeing what this looks like. You're saying, that does not look like a camel. But I want you to practice, exercise this type of reading of the shapes and more of a observation exercise where you are, in fact, looking at your reference and not at your paper, and trusting that you're capturing the overall shape. And it's a mass. Oh, I like it. That's what it looks like. So look closely, and that is what it's supposed to look like. As a quick sketch, you can then come back and retouch certain areas. What are you going to focus on? Obviously, lights and shadows, thickening a few lines. How much detail do I need to describe what's going on here? Rounding of a few shapes, polishing. We do have one last thing that will make it complete, and that is the little shadow underneath the camels. So I'm going to hatch or scumble just a few lines. And there we have it. Yeah, I could spend a little more time with smaller dabs and stippling, but this is not bad for an hour drawing. And we will title this Egypt. (2021). And I really hope you enjoyed it.